The Lunateer by Joy McNeill. There was once a girl by the name of Talitha who lived in a small Greek village on the island of Crete. Now one would think that to live on a Grecan island would be a wondrous life, but sadly for poor Talitha nothing could be further from the truth. She was very lonely and longed for the day she could be set free from her oppressive life with a person who did nothing to promote her self-esteem. You see, her parents died when she was just 14, and she had been sent to live with a distant cousin, Marios, who was the only family member willing to take her in. However, there was no kind thought in this offer to care for his cousin. In fact, his intentions were quite the reverse. Marios was a widower, and he expected Talitha to work very hard for her keep. The only time she felt truly free from the daily chores that had become her monotonous life was when she was allowed to go for a long walk into the countryside. There she found a special place, a sanctuary of sorts. It lay hidden amongst some olive trees and large rocks. This place seemed quite distant from the outside world, yet in reality it was only a stone's throw away from the roadside. There was a deep, clear pool within this hidden sanctuary. Its water sprung as if by magic from between the rocks on the far side of the pool. Talitha would spend as long as she dared at this special place. The birds would sing sweetly in the trees above her head, while she listened to the water trickling down the rocks and into the pool below. One hot July morning, Talitha was having an especially unhappy day. No matter what she did, it was not good enough to please her cousin, who treated her most severely. She could stand his insults no longer and ran crying from the house and straight to her special place. While she sat upon a rock looking down at the sad expression upon her face reflected in the water, Talitha let her teardrops fall freely into the pool. She watched them casting circles as each drop hit the surface of the still water, and she wished, upon wish, that she could have a friend, or more importantly, someone to love her. She missed her parents so much that her body ached with the pain of her loss. She dreamed of having a special person who could make her laugh and forget her daily troubles. Someone who could make her dreary life more bearable. While pondering this thought, Talitha sat by the pond as long as she dared before returning back home to her loneliness and ever-growing list of chores. However, unbeknown to Talitha, the secret pond had magical powers. The tears that she had shed into the clear water that day started something magical that even the cleverest magicians on earth would never have been able to conjure. That night, in the warm summer air, under a moonlit sky, a soft purple haze started to form above the pond. It grew larger and larger until it covered the circumference of the secret sanctuary. Then it rose into the sky higher and higher until it could not be seen with the naked eye. As the mist vanished from view, a soft rain began to fall. However, it only fell upon the pond. And this was no ordinary rain. This was a magical rain. And as the first raindrop touched the surface of the pond, the droplet immediately changed its form. There, in the light of the moon, a wee imp stood upon the water, as if the pond was made of solid blue marble. She was no taller than a grasshopper, with the greenest of eyes and long auburn hair, which fell to her bare feet. She wore a red dress of woven rose petals, with a purple tunic made from violets. The little water imp was a wondrous creature to behold, and beyond anything one would expect from a teardrop. There was something else about this particular tiny imp that surpassed even that perception. Her aura was so radiant that if she were to stand in front of the coldest soul in the world, the glow her aura created would surely warm them to the core of their being. One would doubt there would be a single person alive that would not be touched with happiness by this imp's worth. She walked across the water to the edge of the pond and alighted upon one of the nearby rocks. There the imp sat patiently waiting for the young Grecan woman who had created her to return to her secret sanctuary. The next day was especially stressful for Talitha. Financial times were hard in Greece, and with the extra stress this put upon the good folk of this ancient land, her cousin was not coping very well. Poor Talitha ended up on the receiving end of his frustrations, as he yelled at her drunkenly to fetch him more wine. Once she poured him a fresh glass, he almost spat out the words she was dreading to hear. "I have decided that you are to be married to my good friend Marcos. He thinks you are pretty, although I don't see it myself, and who am I to judge my friend's taste in women? I can't afford to keep you here any longer, but Marcos has told me if you are to marry him, he will let you clean my house and cook my supper each day. A very fair exchange, I'd say." Talitha did not know what to say or how to act when she was told this shocking news. All she could do was run from the house and her cruel cousin as fast as she could. She needed the peace and quiet of her sanctuary to think of how she could save herself from such a horrid plot. No sooner had Talitha pushed aside the branches of the olive tree to sit by the pool than she spied the wee imp looking up at her with a radiant glow. As much as Talitha was surprised to see such a wondrous tiny creature sitting on the rock next to her, she was not afraid. She was more in awe of such an amazing sight, and she felt at ease for the very first time that day. "What heavenly star did you fall from, imp? Or are you deep within my imagination, come to release me from my binds?" "You are correct on both accounts, Talitha. My name is Minas, and I am child of the sky, the water and the earth, and you created me from your teardrop, with help from Luna's rays. I'm here to serve you, and you alone, but given my small size, the magic I am about to bestow upon you will only last half a day. Therefore you need to be careful, very careful when answering the question I'm about to put to you." As she said this, the little imp smiled so brightly that her clothes shone like the first rays of sun upon the morning dew. A tingly feeling washed over Talitha, and she felt at total peace. "I will grant you one wish, but whatever you ask for will only last 12 hours, and then everything will return as it was once before. Even if you asked to be the richest person in the world, you would lose all the wealth you have obtained when the time is over. So bearing that in mind, what does your heart most desire?" Talitha looked at the imp in surprise. How could she, of all people, be offered such an amazing gift? She couldn't think what she wanted the most, apart from wanting to be free of her horrid cousin. After a few minutes' thought, Talitha finally replied, "I would very much like to visit the city of Valletta in Malta. It is a place that intrigues me with its amazing history. But how are you going to get me there?" "Oh, that is the easiest thing in the world, but you must trust with me that I'm about to ask you to do." Talitha nodded in agreement. How could she not trust such a wondrous, magical creature? Very well then, step into the pool and walk into the center. When your feet can no longer touch the bottom, you must relax and let the water carry you downwards, without fear or trying to struggle free. And do not forget, in 12 hours' time, you will be returned to your home in Crete, and everything will be as it was before. After hearing this command by the imp, Talitha only hesitated for a second before stepping into the pool. Given the hot Grecan summer's day, the water was very cold at first, but the closer Talitha got to the center of the pool, the warmer it became. When she could no longer feel the ground beneath her feet, she began to be pulled down quickly as if someone was below her and had taken her by her feet and yanked them hard. When her face touched the surface of the water, she took a deep breath but did not struggle. She was pulled completely under the water, almost as quickly as it had happened. She found herself being drawn rapidly upwards again, and she saw daylight above her head. Then she rose to the surface of the water. However, she was not in the secret pond anymore. She was sitting in a wondrous fountain in the center of a road with yellow buses driving in all directions. Above her head was a sculpture of 3 mermen holding a large platter while soft water splashed down on her from its edges. Then, without warning, she heard a man's voice shouting up at her from the bottom of the fountain. He had an American accent, and he looked worried as he shouted up at her. "Are you all right, miss? Hold on, I'm coming up there to help you down." Before she had time to reply, he had clambered over the bottom portion of the fountain and was soon standing soaking wet just below her. Talitha peered down at the tall, handsome man, a little hesitantly at first, while he held his arms up to her, but the warmth in his brown eyes soothed any concern she had at the thought of receiving help from a stranger. She carefully pulled herself to the concrete edges, and dangling her legs over the side, she slipped forward gently into his waiting arms. "How did you manage to get up there?" he asked in a surprised voice, as he helped her wade across the bottom portion of the fountain. "I have an interest in Greek mythology, and I wanted to get a better look at the mermen," she lied, not wanting him to know the real reason why she was in the fountain of Triton. "Well, that is very interesting because I too have a love of Greek mythology. However, I'm not sure my love of the subject could inspire me to climb into a fountain. But to each their own, I guess." As he said this, the man smiled down at her pleasantly, so she didn't mind that he was teasing her a little. "May I escort you to your accommodation, miss?" "Oh, yes, sorry, I'm forgetting my manners. My name is Gabriel." "Gabriel? Like the angel?" Talitha whispered under her breath. "Sorry, I didn't quite catch what you said," he asked kindly. "My name is Talitha, and I have only just arrived in Valletta, so I have yet to find accommodation." "Where are your bags, Talitha, so that I may carry them for you?" "I don't have any bags with me," she replied a little awkwardly. "Are you sure you're all right?" he asked again, in a kind and concerned tone of voice. "Yes, quite all right, thank you." "Do you have something to change into? Your clothes are soaking wet, as are mine," he added, looking down at the water dripping off the bottom of his pants onto the ground. Talitha looked up at him a little nervously. She didn't know how to answer this question. "Well, by your silence, I am guessing you have come to Valletta with no clothes nor money to buy any, am I right? Please, I don't wish to pry into your personal affairs, however. I would not be a very good person if I didn't help you with this little predicament you seem to have gotten yourself into now, would I? And given your interest in Greek mythology, it is the least I can do for a fellow lover of the arts. Oh, and in case you think there is a hidden agenda as to why I wish to help a damsel in distress, that thought could be no further from my mind. Upon him saying this, Talitha thought she would melt. She had never met such a warm and kind man in her entire life. Apart from the many American tourists who visited Crete, this man was the first American she had ever really spoken to before. I can't let you do that for me, although it is very kind of you to offer, Gabriel. Please, on this one occasion, I must insist. There is a marketplace not far from here. Let me take you there to buy something suitable to change into and some lunch at least. Then I will let you continue on your way without demanding any more of your time. She did not wish to argue with Gabriel's generous offer, and time was indeed going quickly. So she knew she would not get to see much of the beautiful Maltese city if she stood arguing with her rescuer. Talitha nodded gratefully in agreement, and the kind young man led her along the road towards the marketplace. Boletta was indeed an amazing city. It oozed character and history on every corner. Talitha looked around with wonderment at the incredible architecture and historic palaces which they passed on their way to the marketplace. It did not take her long to pick out a pretty floral print dress from the clothing stalls. Gabriel didn't even bother to haggle a price with the seller as he handed the old woman a crisp American $50 note without batting an eyelid at the change he received in return. Now you have something to change into. May I suggest we return to my hotel, which is just around the corner from here? I will wait in the lobby while you take my room key and get changed into your dry clothes. Then, once I have done the same, we will have some lunch at the cafe. Will that be all right with you, Talitha? She nodded happily. This kind man put her so much at ease. She could not imagine there was any malicious intentions in his suggestion for her to return to his hotel room. After all, he did say he was willing to wait in the lobby while she changed out of her wet clothes. The Excelsior Grand Hotel was a very luxurious accommodation. Talitha looked up at the beautiful chandelier which took pride of place before the double staircase, with its wrought iron banister and brilliant red carpet which lay upon the stairs. Gabriel fumbled around in his jacket pocket for a moment before reaching towards Talitha with his hand held out. "Here is my key. The room is the presidential suite on the 10th floor. Please make yourself at home. There's a hairdryer in the bathroom if you care to use it, plenty of towels, and I shall wait here for your return. But do not rush. I have all the time in the world today." Talitha looked at him with amazement upon her face. Who was this man? However, she nodded in reply and whispered a soft thank you as she took the key from him. The presidential suite was indeed a magnificent room. However, Talitha wasted no time looking around it as she quickly dried her hair and changed into her new clothes. The dress fit her perfectly and showed off her figure to its full potential. She quickly placed her wet clothes in the bag the dress had been taken from and hurried back downstairs to the lobby so that Gabriel would not be standing there in his wet clothes too long. "You look stunning in that dress, Talitha," Gabriel commented as he took the key away from her. "Please tell me that you will wait for me to return so that we can have lunch together. The tiki bar at this hotel has an enjoyable lunch menu and an awesome view of the harbor." "I'll be waiting," she replied with a smile. 10 minutes later, Gabriel returned dressed in a finely cut-off white linen suit and a light blue shirt. He was indeed the most handsome man Talitha had ever seen. "The cafe is this way," he said, escorting her outside. In a relaxed conversation, they sat at a table by the balcony overlooking the view of the ocean. It had been a long time since Talitha had been spoken to as an equal by a man, and she relished this experience. Gabriel told her he was in Malta on business and that he planned to travel throughout other parts of Europe before he was to return to the United States in a month's time. However, he did not try to pry information from Talitha about her own life. He just listened with interest when she told him she was from Crete. Most of their conversation was about their love of Greek mythology and the arts. Time slipped by quickly, as if it had not moved at all. It was only when Gabriel had to make a quick business call that Talitha noticed it was already 3 p.m. She would have to hurry if she wanted to see the rest of Valletta before the magic ran out, and she was pulled back to Crete and her life of misery. As much as it pained her to do so, when Gabriel returned to the table, she told him she had to go. "I have much of the city I wish to see, and my time here is very limited. Thank you so much for your kindness. I'm very grateful." "How may I contact you, Talitha, because I would very much like to see you again," Gabriel replied with almost a hint of disappointment in his voice. "I'm sorry. I will be leaving in a few hours' time to return home, and I have no way of keeping in contact with you," she replied in almost a whisper. "Well, if that's the case, may I at least spend these last few hours with you, Talitha? I will happily show you to whichever tourist location you have in mind to see, if you will allow me to accompany you. I had planned on a driving trip to the HMS Maori wreckage in the harbor this afternoon, but I can easily postpone that for another day." Talitha felt her heart rise up into her throat. She had never had someone so willingly want to spend time with her, especially when he was happy to change his own plans to suit hers. She felt excited and humbled that this American gentleman wanted to remain in her company. However, she was also a little nervous about him joining her, because she was unsure how she was going to be so hurriedly pulled back to Crete when her time in Malta came to an end. But she nodded her head in agreement without giving the issue another thought. "What would you like to see, Talitha? I have seen most of the attractions in this city has to offer, so I'll be able to take you to see them." "I would very much like to see the Sacra Infermaria. You know it as the Holy Infirmary. My mother told me about it and its history when I was young. She was a nurse, and when she and my father visited Valletta, that's one of the places they went to see." "Then we shall go there first," Gabriel replied with a smile. The next few hours went by quickly, while the pair visited one wonderful sight after the next, and the time slipped by so fast that Talitha almost forgot she had to be pulled away from the city at any moment. It was then Talitha needed to use a restroom that she was brought back to the realization that her excursion was at an end. The minute her hands ran into the cold water from the tap in the restroom, she was suddenly pulled forwards with a great force towards the water running down the plug hole. Talitha was terrified that she would be squashed to death. However, something in the back of her head reminded her of the words the imp had said. "You must relax and let the water carry you downwards, without fear or trying to struggle free." When she did this, Talitha soon found herself dripping wet and standing in the bathroom at her cousin's house. Her heart sunk with the realization that her magical day had ended. What would Gabriel think when she never returned from the restroom? Talitha slumped down onto the bathroom floor and wept. She would never forget her one day of freedom and romance. Yes, romance, because if there was a possibility that one could fall in love in only a few hours, she was sure that Gabriel had stolen her heart. But nothing would ever come of it now. She would never see him again, and she was destined for a life of misery at Marcos' wife. While she sat there weeping, there was suddenly a loud banging on the bathroom door. "I know you are in there, Talitha. What is the meaning of you being away all day? I had to make my own lunch and dinner. I shall not have you stay in here a moment longer, do you hear?" Her cousin yelled with a drunken slur in his voice. "I will take you to Marcos' home tomorrow and let him teach you to be an obedient wife. I wash my hands of you, and I will not keep you under my roof for another day. You are a worthless excuse of a woman." While this was happening in Crete, back in Malta, Gabriel was getting increasingly worried about Talitha. She had not returned from the restroom. He asked a lady entering it if she could check that his friend was all right. When she returned to inform him that there was no one inside, Gabriel could not understand why Talitha had left so abruptly without saying goodbye. He returned to his hotel suite feeling an emptiness for the loss of the pretty Greek girl. The following day, Gabriel decided to go on the diving excursion of the HMS Maori, which he had canceled the afternoon before. He needed to find a distraction, because Talitha's sudden departure was weighing heavily on his mind. The sun shone brightly on the glistening water as he dived into the sea. However, when he arrived at the sunken ship, he was not prepared for what he saw next. There, sitting on the railing, was a tiny creature dressed in red and purple clothes, who was not in any way, shape, or form a mammal that belonged in the salty ocean. Minas looked at him intently, and as he stared into her eyes, the image of Talitha was staring back at him. Although he wasn't scared, Gabriel wondered if there was a lack of oxygen in his tank, for surely he had become delusional. He kicked off, swimming upwards to the surface. As quickly as he dared, with decompression stops on the way. When he reached the surface, Gabriel began to wonder if he was really losing his mind. There was no sign of Aletta's harbor anymore. Everything had totally changed in front of him. He made his way through the aqua blue, crystal clear water and up onto the sandy white beach. He had no idea where he was, or more importantly, how he had gotten there. Gabriel decided to head towards the houses he spied in the distance and ask where he was. No sooner had he walked along the beach and drawn close to the nearest house than he saw a couple of people walking towards him. Although it looked more like the young woman was being dragged towards his direction by a rather burly-looking man with black hair and olive-tan skin. Whatever the case, Gabriel was not impressed with what he was witnessing. "Are you all right there?" He couldn't help calling out to the young woman. Upon hearing the American's voice, the man stopped in his tracks, and as the distressed young woman looked up towards Gabriel, he could then see that it was Talitha. His heart skipped a beat. Surely he was dreaming this whole situation. It made no sense at all. But before he could say another word, Marios looked at him with a menacing glare and yelled rudely, "Mind your own business, Yankee." "Well, you see, I can't do that, because it is my business. The young woman you are holding captive is my girlfriend," Gabriel replied abruptly. There was a stunned silence for a moment, as all three people stood there looking at each other. Talitha could not believe the man was Gabriel, let alone that he had just stated that she was his girlfriend. Finally, after sizing up the American, it was Marios who spoke first. "Well, if that is the case, then you are welcome to her. She is nothing but a financial burden to me anyway," he replied, pushing Talitha towards Gabriel, as if she was a sack of olives. He then walked off in the direction they had come without looking back. Gabriel stepped forward and took Talitha into his arms. "I'm in Crete, aren't I?" he asked quietly, as he felt her body trembling next to his own. "Yes, you are." "How did you get here?" she replied in almost a whisper. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," came his reply. "If you have met a little imp wearing a red and purple outfit, I would," she replied with a happy sigh. "Well, as a matter of fact, I did. But I think that story can wait a while, until I've held you for a time. I don't plan on you ever slipping away from me again, Talitha." They stood there upon the white sand, wrapped in each other's arms, totally absorbed in that moment, while the faint crescent moon smiled down happily upon them in the clear blue sky. The end.